Cheat on your wife with mine? That was the mistake that set everything in motion. Back in the early 2000s, I thought my life was simple. 2 kids, a steady home, and a wife I trusted. But one small suspicion would unravel the truth, and what followed would not only end my marriage, but completely burn another man's life to the ground. It started as a whisper in the back of my mind. Something small, something that didn't quite add up. My wife had been spending more and more time away from home, claiming she was dropping the kids at her parents' house. Now, that wouldn't have been strange if her parents lived nearby, but they didn't. They lived nearly 90 minutes away, and somehow she was making that trip 2 or 3 times a week. At first, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she was just tired, or maybe she needed the extra help with the kids. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Why would she go through the hassle of driving that far just to leave the kids there? And why so often? I started noticing her car, not just when she left, but when she came back. I tracked the mileage, and sure enough, the numbers didn't lie. Week after week, her car racked up hundreds of unexplained miles. 400 extra miles every single week. That was when the whisper in my head turned into a siren. Something was happening behind my back, and I wasn't going to ignore it any longer. But suspicions alone weren't enough. I needed proof. And the proof would come in the most unexpected way through a single careless mistake she made that changed everything. Sometimes the truth doesn't come crashing down in one dramatic moment. Sometimes it slips through the cracks in the smallest, most careless mistake. For me, it was a single sticky note. One ordinary afternoon, I sat down at our computer. Back then, AOL was the big thing. Email, chat rooms, the works. And there it was, taped right next to the keyboard, a yellow sticky note with her password scribbled in her handwriting, almost like an invitation, almost like fate itself wanted me to see what she'd been hiding. I froze for a second, staring at it. My heart pounded in my chest. I knew what I was about to do would cross a line. But hadn't she already crossed a line first? My hands shook as I typed it in, letter by letter. And just like that, the door to her secret world swung wide open. The inbox was ordinary at first. Family updates, bills, a few work emails. But then I found them. Long threads between her and her old college best friend. Casual at first, then darker, heavier. She wasn't writing about me, or the kids, or even her parents. She was writing about him, her high school ex, the one she apparently never let go of. The words cut through me like glass. How she met up with him, how they laughed together, how they snuck away to cheap motels for hours at a time. She didn't even try to soften it. It was all there, plain as day. And then came the part that twisted the knife even deeper, her mocking his wife, making fun of how she'd let herself go after having kids, laughing about how she had to settle into her role, while my wife was sneaking around with her husband behind her back. It wasn't just betrayal, it was cruelty. I remember sitting there staring at the screen, my stomach in knots. It wasn't just the act of cheating. It was the casual way she bragged about it, like breaking her vows, breaking our family was some kind of private joke. I printed out those emails, every last one of them, and I hid them. I didn't confront her, not yet, because I knew this was just the beginning. The emails gave me the truth I needed, but they weren't enough. If I was going to end this, if I was going to protect my kids and myself, I needed something stronger, hard evidence, something undeniable. And that's when I realized I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. I needed someone who could uncover the full picture. That's when Ron entered the story. I had the emails. I had her words in black and white. But inside, I knew if I went into battle with only that, she'd find a way to spin it. She'd deny, deflect, twist the story until I was left looking paranoid, bitter, maybe even crazy. No, I needed something undeniable, something that would leave her speechless when it finally hit the table. That's when I made the call that would change everything. I reached out to an old friend of mine who worked in law enforcement, someone I trusted. I told him the situation in hushed tones, embarrassed but determined. He didn't judge. Instead, he gave me the name of a man who'd once worn the same badge but now made his living digging into secrets, a private investigator. His name was Ron. From the first handshake, I knew he was the right man for the job. Calm, confident, sharp-eyed, Ron carried himself like someone who had seen it all. I handed him the printed emails, laid out the strange patterns I'd noticed, and asked him one simple thing: find out the truth, no matter how ugly it is. He nodded, almost too casually, like this was just another day at the office. But to me, it was life or death. The waiting was the hardest part. Days turned into weeks. Every time my wife walked out the door, my stomach tightened. Every smile she gave me felt like a mask. Every "I'll be back soon" carried the weight of a lie I couldn't yet expose. At night, I'd lie awake, wondering what Ron was seeing, what he was capturing, and when it would all come crashing down. And then the call came. His voice was steady, professional, but the words still hit me like a sledgehammer. I've got it. Ron's report was brutal in its precision. Times, dates, photos, every detail laid out like a case file in a courtroom. The truth unfolded page by page. The pattern was always the same. She'd pack up the kids, drive them to her parents' house 90 minutes away, kiss them goodbye, and then drive straight into the arms of another man. Lunch dates that blurred into motel rooms, hours behind closed doors, and then, like nothing had happened, she'd scoop up the kids, plaster on that same old smile, and come home as if she hadn't just torn our marriage to pieces. The photos made it undeniable. Grainy black and white shots of her stepping into a dingy motel room hand in hand with him. The timestamp glared from the corner of the image like a cruel reminder that while I was at home, trusting her, she was busy building a second life in secret. My chest burned as I flipped through the file. It wasn't shock anymore. It was rage. Pure, calculated rage. Because now I knew. Now I had everything I needed. But here's the thing. This wasn't just going to be about ending my marriage. Not anymore. If she thought she could betray me and walk away with her life intact, she was dead wrong. And if he thought he could invade my family, take what was mine, and go back to his own happy little home, he was about to learn the cost of crossing me. This wasn't just about proof anymore. It was about revenge. And with Ron's help, I was going to burn his life to the ground. The night I finished reading Ron's report, I sat alone at the kitchen table long after everyone had gone to bed. The stack of papers lay in front of me like a loaded weapon, each page another bullet ready to fire. I thought about my parents, how their infidelity had poisoned my childhood, how every fight and every slammed door still echoed in my memory. I swore back then that I'd never let history repeat itself, and here I was, staring at evidence that it was happening all over again. But unlike my parents, I wasn't going to sweep it under the rug. I wasn't going to work it out or pretend it never happened. No, this was going to end differently. I contacted a divorce lawyer the very next morning. Cold, professional, efficient. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't drop hints. I simply put the machinery in motion. But divorce, I realized, wasn't enough. Divorce would only cut the ties between us. She'd still walk away with half of everything, still spin her story, still look people in the eye and pretend she was the victim. I wanted more than separation. I wanted justice. I wanted destruction. So I turned back to Ron. Find out about him, I said. Everything. And Ron delivered. His name was Bob, married, 3 kids. On the surface, he looked like the picture-perfect family man. But behind the curtain, he was nothing more than a parasite feeding off his wife's crust the same way he fed off mine. His job? Vice President of Sales at his father-in-law's company, which meant the same man whose daughter he was betraying had given him the career, the paycheck, the house, the life he enjoyed. The irony was delicious. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. And in that puzzle, I saw my opportunity. Divorce would sever me from my wife. But what about Bob? Why should he get to crawl back into his perfect suburban life after tearing mine apart? No, he wasn't walking away from this clean. I wanted him to feel the sting of betrayal. I wanted him to watch his world crumble, just like I had watched mine. The plan was simple, elegant, and devastating. On the same day my wife would be served divorce papers, papers she wouldn't see coming, Bob's wife would be handed Ron's full report. Photos, dates, times, every sordid detail laid out for her to see. 2 bombs, 1 detonation. My wife would lose me. Bob would lose everything. And neither of them would ever see it coming. The morning was calm, too calm. I watched my wife leave for work, her hair perfectly styled, her smile hiding everything she thought I didn't know. I kept my own emotions buried, playing the part of the unsuspecting husband. Every step she took, every casual glance back at me felt like a challenge, like she was daring me to act. I didn't. Not yet. At her office, the divorce papers were delivered. Professional, cold, legal. No drama, no yelling, just the undeniable proof that everything she had taken for granted, my trust, my life, was no longer hers to manipulate. But while she read, confused, angry, and maybe just a little scared, Ron was already on the move. He met with Bob's wife that same day, carrying the full dossier, the photos, the emails, the timestamps, the motel addresses, everything laid bare. I imagined her reaction as he handed it over, the gasp, the trembling hands, the sudden fire lighting behind her eyes. She had trusted him, loved him, believed in the life they had built together, and in one moment, she discovered that her world, just like mine, had been a lie. The fallout was immediate. She took action with a clarity and speed that was both terrifying and beautiful. She cleaned out their joint accounts, packed up the children, and walked away, leaving Bob with nothing but the echo of his mistakes. And then, the dominoes started to fall. Bob's father-in-law discovered the betrayal. The man who had given him his job, his house, his life, turned his back. Bob was fired on the spot, evicted from the home he thought was secure. Humiliation mounted with every step, every angry phone call, every whispered rumor in the town that had once respected him. But the story didn't end with financial ruin. It escalated. The confrontations grew heated. Angry words turned into physical violence. Bob ended up with a broken nose at the hands of his brother-in-law. Legal documents piled up, restraining orders issued. Police were called, records filed. Jail time followed. The man who had thought he could sneak around, hide in the shadows, cheat with impunity, was gone. Everything he had built, every carefully constructed facade, collapsed in a single day. And as I watched from the sidelines, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. Not joy, never joy, but a sense that justice finally had been served. But even as Bob's world crumbled, I knew the story wasn't over. There was still the aftermath, the quiet rebuilding, the life that had to be stitched back together from the ashes. Bob's world wasn't just collapsing. It was imploding, piece by piece, like a house of cards caught in a storm. Each day brought a new reminder of how far he had fallen. First came the financial blow. His wife had taken the kids and cleaned out their joint accounts. Every dollar he thought he could count on was gone. His carefully curated life, built on lies and secrets, was stripped away before his eyes. Then came the professional humiliation. His father-in-law, who had once been his lifeline, fired him immediately. The VP of sales, the man who walked into every boardroom with confidence, now had nothing. No job, no title, no credibility. Eviction followed. The house he had taken for granted, the home he had returned to every night like nothing had happened, was suddenly off limits. His ex-wife's parents, the owners, showed him the door. Just like that, the place he had thought of as safe became a battlefield of his mistakes. And then the personal consequences, the ones that stung deeper than money or property, began to stack. Public whispers, judgmental looks, rumors spiraling through friends and neighbors. People who had once admired him now sneered, and even those who were neutral began to distance themselves. But perhaps the most brutal blow came from family confrontation. Bob, desperate, tried to reclaim some sense of control, confronted his ex-wife, and things escalated violently. Her brother stepped in, and Bob ended up with a broken nose, a visible, permanent reminder of his arrogance and betrayal. Legal battles followed, restraining orders, police reports, criminal charges. Every misstep he had taken, every lie he had told, came back to haunt him in ways he had never imagined. Ron's work ensured that every piece of evidence of Bob's betrayal remained documented, public, undeniable. And though the man tried to hide, move, disappear, the scars of his actions would follow him forever. Reputation destroyed, family fractured, career obliterated. And yet, even amidst the chaos, I watched quietly from the sidelines, knowing that my family was safe, my truth validated, and the scales of justice, however delayed, had been balanced. But the story wasn't just about him. It was about what happened after the storm, how lives healed, and how the survivors of betrayal rebuilt their worlds from the ashes. Bob didn't just lose his home, his job, and his family. He lost his place in the world. The man who once walked with confidence, whose life seemed untouchable, was reduced to whispers and shadows. People remembered him not as a VP, not as a husband or father, but as a cautionary tale, a man undone by his own choices. Rumors followed him wherever he went. Even when he tried to start over in a new state, people remembered the scandal, the betrayal, the humiliation, the kind of mistakes that leave invisible fingerprints on your soul. He vanished from social media, deleted accounts, tried to erase any trace of his existence, but the memory lingered in every corner of the life he had ruined. Meanwhile, his ex-wife rebuilt. She took over her father's company, became respected in her work, and created a life that was safe and stable for her children. She had the strength to rise above betrayal, to turn pain into progress, and to reclaim her dignity. Every success she earned was a reminder of what Bob had lost, not just financially, but morally, socially, and emotionally. As for me, my life settled into a quiet rhythm. Divorce finalized, custody arrangements managed, and the children growing up healthy and safe. My ex-wife and I stayed connected only when necessary, for the sake of the kids. Beyond that, there was no bitterness, only a calm awareness of boundaries and consequences. It was strange the way life rebalanced itself. While one man's life crumbled under the weight of lies, another rose from the wreckage. The scales had shifted, and though the road had been messy, justice, meted out in unexpected ways, had been served. And yet, I couldn't help but reflect. Betrayal has a ripple effect. It doesn't just hurt the two people involved, it touches everyone around them, the children, the families, even bystanders who witness the fallout. One bad choice, one act of selfishness, can echo for years. Looking back now, it's hard not to marvel at the power of consequences. One man's choices destroyed not just his own life, but the fragile trust of everyone around him. One woman's betrayal set off a chain reaction that left careers, homes, and families in ruin. And one decision, to seek truth, to act deliberately, and to demand accountability, changed everything. Cheating might feel like a secret thrill in the moment, like a game no one will ever discover. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and when they do, they don't just hurt feelings. They destroy lives, careers, families, futures once taken for granted. And yet, amid all the chaos, life continues. My family healed. My kids grew up strong. My ex-wife moved on. Bob vanished, leaving only the memory of his mistakes. And through it all, I realized something important. Revenge isn't about hatred. It's about restoring balance, protecting what matters, and making sure the truth is never ignored. In the end, betrayal teaches lessons no one ever wants to learn firsthand. It shows the fragility of trust, the consequences of selfish choices, and the undeniable fact that actions, good or bad, always come back to define your story. So next time someone thinks they can cheat, lie, or betray without consequence, remember this story. Because when the truth comes out, it won't just change your life, it can change everything.